This is the story that might keep you up at night, the one I warned you about. This is Deep Rock Elementary School. Deep Rock Elementary, mascot, the Tigers. School color, blue. Deep Rock Elementary closed at the end of the last school year. There is a brand spanking new school for those kids a couple miles away. Still, though, if you went to Deep Rock Elementary, the closing of that school might feel sad. You know, you might have some great memories. Maybe several generations of your family went there. That schoolhouse has been around in some form since 1892. So for some folks, it might be a little sad that that school closed. From another angle, though, literally from another angle, literally from an aerial view, it is something other than sad. Because there, we see the little arrow there? There is Deep Rock Elementary. You see all those white circles around it in all directions? Do you know what those are? Those are humongous tanks of crude oil. Lots of them. Those tanks of crude oil surrounding the former Deep Rock Elementary School are, in fact, the largest oil storage facility in the world. And there are a lot of big oil facilities in the world. Just in this country, we have the Sunoco Logistics Nederland terminal that holds 25 million barrels, the Houston Fuel Oil terminal that holds 36 million barrels, the Louisiana Offshore Oil Port, which holds 67 million barrels of oil. But Cushing, Oklahoma, calls itself the pipeline crossroads of the world, and their hub is bigger than all of those. The Cushing hub holds 82 million barrels of oil. It could fit all the oil from the Sunoco and Houston terminals and still have room for another 20 million barrels plus. The Cushing hub is so big, and so many oil pipelines come together there. There's so much oil stored there that the federal government has designated that giant farm of huge oil tanks as critical national infrastructure. And until just a few months ago, right in the middle of it was, literally right in the middle of it, was this elementary school. And that scariest map in the world is how we here at the Rachel Maddow Show this week have been celebrating National Remember About Earthquakes Day. The day isn't actually called that. Technically, they call it the Great Shakeout, but I find that too embarrassing to say. So I call it Remember About Earthquakes Day. And what happens on Remember About Earthquakes Day every year is that there are earthquake drills that happen all across the country, all at the exact same time on the same day. They happen 10:15 a.m. on 10/15, on October 15th. So it's easy to remember, 10:15 on 10/15. Millions of people took part this year. And every year, there's always lots of participants in, California and across the West, where earthquakes are common. They do these kind of drills all the time, including on Remember About Earthquakes Day. But now, the Great Shakeout is being observed with renewed urgency in places where people never used to join in. Places like Oklahoma, because now it turns out we have new kinds of earthquakes. Now, we as humans have developed the technology to make earthquakes as a terrible unintended consequence of the way we get oil and gas out of the ground now. Earlier this year, the state of Oklahoma finally admitted what the science had been suggesting for years, that when companies dispose of huge volumes of toxic wastewater from their fracking operations by injecting that stuff deep into the earth, sometimes the earth doesn't like it. Sometimes it triggers earthquakes. We had one of those earthquakes just a few days ago in Oklahoma. I mean, since the fracking boom started, Oklahoma's had a few of these things. The state has had, in fact, lots of these earthquakes with increasing frequency. 700 earthquakes in Oklahoma this year, which is already more than they had in all of last year. I mean, Oklahoma didn't really used to have earthquakes of any significant size at all. They certainly didn't have them all the time. But now, Oklahoma has a ton of earthquakes all the time. And the one they had last weekend was a big one. It was a 4.5. And you know where the one, this 4.5 unusually large earthquake was last weekend in Oklahoma? It was there. It was in Cushing, home of the Fightin' Tigers and the former Deep Rock Elementary School, right in the middle of the biggest oil storage facility in the world. What could possibly go wrong? So happy Remember About Earthquakes Day in our new age of man-made earthquakes. God forbid another really serious quake ever happens in Cushing, Oklahoma, and that bit of our crucial national infrastructure. But if it does happen there, we will never be able to say it was a surprise. Joining us now is Jeremy Boak. He's director of the Oklahoma Geological Survey. Dr. Boak, thank you very much for being with us tonight. I appreciate having you here.
It's a pleasure to be here, Rachel.
I know it is an unscientific and probably therefore sort of offensive thing for me to say the Earth doesn't like it, talking about the injection of fracking waste fluid. But is everybody sort of on the same everybody on board now with the fact that these are man-made earthquakes and we can essentially start and stop them by whether or not we do this kind of injection behavior?
Yes, well, I haven't done any polling on it, but most of the technical community agrees that yes, indeed. We took a position in April as the Oklahoma Geological Survey a couple of months before I came on board and said, yes, indeed, there is a connection between the injection of water from oil and gas operations, and it's not actually frack water, it's naturally occurring water that occurs in the formations that produce the oil and gas. These happen to be ones that produce a large amount of water for every gallon of oil you get out of them. So we've been disposing of a large amount of this formation water, naturally occurring water, but it is very salty. Somewhere well north of ocean water and beyond, in many cases, Dead Sea water. This is really salty water. And of course, because it's been living there for tens of thousands of years with oil associated with it, it's not really sweet. That's the water that we're disposing of. We're taking it out of formations, separating the oil and gas, and then we've got this stuff that has to be disposed of. For many, many years, disposing of it in this one formation was an extremely good idea. And so we did. We disposed of a lot of water in this deep formation called the Arbuckle Group. It happens to sit right on top of the crystalline basement. It was a long way away from groundwater. Great place to put it. Turns out, however, when you really crank up the amount you put in there, you start changing the stress state deep in the rock, and you actually cause some small faults to move, the ones that are oriented just right within the stress field in Oklahoma. So we've had somewhere, I believe we're now past 700 earthquakes of magnitude 3 or greater this year.
Looking specifically at Cushing, around the Cushing hub, obviously this is critical national infrastructure according to the federal government. I mean, that school that I highlighted there was basically to capture people's imagination. That school is closed now. But looking at that as a facility, are you particularly worried about seismic activity around that spot in Oklahoma?
Yes. We're worried about earthquakes sort of anywhere in this large area. It's about 15% of the area of Oklahoma that's been having this spate of large earthquakes. And we've had magnitude 4 earthquakes, we've had somewhere in the 20s now. Last number I remember was 22, and I can't remember whether that was before or after these Cushing earthquakes. So we've had a number of these earthquakes this year that are of that scale. Those aren't the ones that cause the damage, but if you have enough of them, you start worrying about the next one that might be bigger.
Dr. Jeremy Boak, director of the Oklahoma Geological Survey. Thank you for helping us understand all this. I feel like I understand it much better just talking to you for this short amount of time. I hope you'll come back for us sometime.
I'd be happy to.
Great. Thank you, sir. All right. We've got a cocktail moment coming up tonight. We've got more news coming up tonight. It's an unusually packed Friday show. Please stay with us.